The sea was unnaturally calm on the morning the omen appeared. The Aegean, known for its restless winds and chattering waves, lay flat as hammered bronze, so still that the sky reflected upon it like a flawless mirror. No gulls cried. No waves broke against the curved harbor stones of Thalassia. Not even the familiar creak of moored ships disturbed the silence. And then, cutting through the stillness, a column of fire burst upward from the horizon. Tall, straight, and blinding, a brilliant pillar of gold and red rising from the surface of the sea without smoke or heat. For a long moment the islanders stared, unsure whether the light was dawn's trickery or divine intervention. But as the flame grew brighter, pulsing softly like a living heart, no doubts remained. Some believed it to be a sign from Helios. Others whispered of the lost Atlans, an ancient civilization said to sleep beneath the waves. Children watched, wide-eyed, as if a god might step from the flames at any moment. But Commander Aegean of Thalassia felt no awe, only an unease that tightened across his chest. Standing on a high terrace overlooking the silent waters, Aegean studied the impossible fire. With his arms clasped behind his back and his dark hair tied with a warrior's cord, he looked every bit the seasoned general he was, one who had fought raiders, pirates, and rival kings, and who had never once returned defeated. His second-in-command, Damon, a weathered veteran with sharp eyes, joined him and asked what he saw in the phenomenon. Aegean answered that he feared it was neither miracle nor illusion, but a warning. By midday, the High Council summoned the people to the Agora, where the flame still burned clearly on the horizon for all to see. The High Priestess Arista proclaimed the fire to be the long-lost flame of Aegeus, a divine sign of favor not seen in 1,000 years. The crowd erupted in excitement, but Aegean stepped forward with caution, reminding the council that omens in old stories often signaled catastrophe. When the council questioned what mortal threat could manifest such a marvel, Aegean proposed a reconnaissance mission by sea. Despite the High Priestess's objections, warning him not to approach something sacred, Councilman Lycres granted him authority to investigate the phenomenon. The crowd watched with mixed fear and hope as Aegean prepared to lead a mission toward the mysterious flame. That evening, as torches lit the harbor, Aegean, Damon, and 50 elite mariners boarded the sleek warship Alethea. Its scarlet-trimmed hull and silver wave crest gleamed faintly against the darkening sky. Before the ship departed, a young boy ran forward and handed Aegean a small clay dolphin charm, insisting it would bring sailors safely home. Aegean bowed and tied the talisman around his neck, promising to return with the truth. As the Alethea glided from the harbor and cut across the dark sea, the flame ahead grew brighter, shifting from gold to deep crimson, glowing more fiercely against the falling night. Near midnight, the warship slowed as it neared the towering column of fire. Its glow spilled across the dark waters in shimmering red-gold streams. The closer they came, the more the men trembled, struck silent by awe. The flame hummed, a deep, resonant vibration that thrummed in their bones. It gave no heat, no smoke, no scent, only an overwhelming presence. Aegean ordered the ship to halt and prepared a small skiff, insisting he would approach the fire alone. Damon protested, but Aegean reminded him that a commander must risk himself before any of his men. Rowing the small skiff toward the flame, Aegean felt the vibrations intensify as the crimson light washed over him. He stopped only when the skiff began to quiver. Rising carefully, he peered into the swirling fire. Something moved within it. A silhouette, then a figure tall and unmistakably human. Damon shouted from the warship as the figure stepped forward. The burning column parted like water, and a man stepped out onto the surface of the sea itself. His skin shimmered like polished bronze, his hair dark as the deep, and his eyes glowed molten gold. Ancient patterns etched his armor, symbols older than any city. The being raised one hand, and his voice rumbled through the sea and sky, calm yet thunderous. He introduced himself as Aegeus, last guardian of the old flame, and warned that a war far older than Thalassia was returning, one that had destroyed his own world. The flame had risen now to awaken, test, and arm those who would be chosen to stand against the coming darkness. Aegeus pointed directly at Aegean, declaring that he had been chosen to lead the warriors of the Aegean Flame, and that when the second flame rose, the enemy would already be upon them. A violent tremor shook the sea. The flame roared upward like a living beast. Lightning cracked across the sky with a deafening blast. As Aegeus's final words echoed, his form dissolved into the air, and the entire column of fire collapsed into the ocean with a thunderous hiss. The sea erupted in waves that slammed into Aeson's skiff, flipping it on its side. The warship rocked violently as Damon and the crew shouted his name. The world twisted in a surge of water and light, the air humming with the dying echo of a god's voice, and then everything went black around Aeson as he was swallowed by the depths. Darkness enveloped Aeson as the sea yanked him downward. The waves churned violently above him, a furious storm of foam and pressure created by the collapse of the mysterious flame. His limbs thrashed instinctively as he fought toward the surface, lungs burning, the clay dolphin charm bouncing against his chest. For a moment, he wasn't sure whether he was swimming or simply being tossed around by the ocean's rage. The water pounded his ears and blurred his thoughts, but a single instinct remained fixed in his mind: live. He needed to break through the surface, to breathe again, to return to his men. His arms reached upward, following the faint shimmer of moonlight through the turmoil. With a desperate push, he burst into the open air, gasping, coughing, and trying to understand where sky ended and sea began. Shouts echoed across the waves. Dim torches bobbed in the distance. Damon's voice, furious, relieved, terrified at once, shouted his name. Aeson forced his aching muscles to move, stroking toward the warship as it cut across the roiling water. The Alethea swayed heavily, struggling against the chaos unleashed by the vanished flame. Several sailors leaned over the side, gripping long poles and ropes. As Aeson approached, Damon threw himself down, almost falling overboard as he reached for him. With a final surge, Aeson grabbed the rope and was hauled on board by several hands. Damon's face appeared above him immediately, lined with worry and anger. "By every god on Olympus, Aeson, you stubborn fool," he muttered, barely disguising the relief in his voice. Aeson collapsed onto the deck, coughing seawater, but he looked up at his friend and managed a hoarse whisper. "I met him," he said. Damon frowned. "Met who?" Aeson raised his hand weakly, pointing toward the sea where the flame had stood moments earlier. "Aegeus, the guardian of the old flame." Silence fell across the deck as the men crowded around, dripping, exhausted, and shaken. Some exchanged uncertain glances. Others looked terrified. Damon crouched beside Aeson, gripping his arm with a steadying hand. "Tell me exactly what you saw," he demanded. And so, still breathless, Aeson described the man, if he could be called a man, who walked upon the sea, whose armor carried ancient symbols, whose molten eyes held the weight of forgotten ages. He repeated the warning. A war older than Thalassia, older than any known city, was coming. The flame had awakened to prepare them, and that he had been chosen. A murmur swept through the crew. Some crossed themselves. Others whispered prayers. Damon's jaw tightened, and though he trusted Aeson more than any living soul, the magnitude of what he heard left even him shaken. "If what you saw is true," he said slowly, "then the gods have drawn us into something far greater than politics or borders." Aeson nodded faintly. "Help me stand." Damon pulled him to his feet. Despite his exhaustion, Aeson walked to the prow of the ship, staring at the black waters where the fire had once burned. The sea was calm again, unervingly so, as if the disturbance had never existed. The stars glittered above, innocent and distant, unbothered by the chaos below. But the sea still hummed faintly, as though remembering the divine presence that had pierced it. A faint glow stirred beneath the waves. "Do you see that?" whispered a sailor. A soft blue shimmer spread below the surface, swirling in twisting patterns like liquid stars. The crew stepped back, startled. Damon reached instinctively for his sword, though he knew instinct weapons were useless against something like this. The glow intensified, dancing beneath the hull, encircling the ship before slowly fading away, leaving only dark water once more. Aeson felt a chill run down his spine. "The sea knows," he murmured. "The sea remembers." Damon exhaled sharply. "We return to Thalassia," he said. "Whatever is coming, the council must hear of it." Aeson agreed, though a heavy unease settled within him. The flame was gone, but its message lingered like smoke in the back of his mind. And something told him that leaving the site did not mean leaving the danger. The Alethea turned eastward, sails catching a fresh wind as they began the voyage home. But the night did not return to normal. Twice, the sea glowed faintly in the distance, shifting colors like a lantern swaying underwater. Once, an unnatural wave rose from a perfectly calm surface, lifting the ship slightly before settling. The men whispered nervously, gripping their weapons, though none of them knew what they would fight if something emerged from the depths. Sometime past midnight, Damon approached Aeson, who stood at the railing, eyes fixed on the horizon. "We'll be back by dawn if the wind holds," he said quietly. "You should sleep." Aeson didn't look away from the water. "I can't. Every time I close my eyes, I see him standing on the water, as if the sea itself obeyed him." Damon folded his arms. "Do you believe his warning?" Aeson turned to him slowly. "I don't know if he was God or spirit or something older, but I felt truth in his words. A war is coming, one the world is not prepared for." Damon exhaled. "Then we'll prepare it." For a moment, the two men stood silently beside each other. The bond between them, hardened in battles and sealed through trust, felt more important now than ever. At last, Aeson nodded. "Very well. Wake me at first light." He tried to sleep in the narrow captain's quarters, but rest eluded him. His dreams flickered with images. A burning sea, a city made of bronze sinking into waves, shadows rising from the depths with glowing eyes, and the face of Aegeus fading into fire. When he finally opened his eyes again, the sky outside had brightened with the colors of dawn. The ship rocked gently, and distant gulls cried, this time the natural kind. He stepped onto the deck. The men looked haggard but relieved to see the familiar outline of Thalassia growing ahead, its marble temples gleaming in the sunrise, its cliffs rising proudly from the sea. Damon stood beside the helmsman, adjusting the sail angle as the Alethea glided toward the harbor. But as they approached, a new sight froze Aeson in place. Smoke, not from chimneys or torches, but thick plumes rising from the western district of the city, heavy, dark, and spreading. The closer they came, the more clearly the devastation appeared. A series of buildings had collapsed. Market tents were torn to shreds. People ran through the streets, shouting and pointing. "My gods!" Damon breathed. "What happened here?" The ship docked urgently. Aeson leapt onto the pier before the gangplank fully lowered, sprinting across the stone as the smell of fire grew stronger. Soldiers rushed past him, carrying buckets of water. Civilians huddled together, crying or clutching loved ones. Somewhere, a woman screamed the name of her missing child. Aeson grabbed a wounded guardsman staggering by. "Report!" he commanded. The soldier, blood streaking down his face, saluted weakly. "Commander!" Something came from the sea. Not ships, not men. Shadows, shapes, like mist but solid. They rose from the water at dawn and... His voice faltered as he recalled the horror. They tore through the market. Buildings collapsed. Dozens injured. The moment the sun rose fully, they vanished. Aeson's breath caught. Dawn. The same hour the flame vanished. He squeezed the soldier's shoulder and ran deeper into the city, Damon on his heels. The devastation was undeniable. Stalls were crushed as though by invisible fists. Deep gouges marred the stone roads, glowing faintly with a bluish residue that evaporated in the morning air. People whispered in fear, speaking of ghostly figures, shapes that flickered like smoke but struck like iron. Aeson knelt beside one such gouge, touching the faint residue. It tingled against his skin with unnatural coldness. He clenched his jaw. "This is no earthly enemy," he said quietly. Damon crouched beside him, You think this is what Aegeus warned us about? Aeson rose. No, I think this is only the beginning. The High Council soon summoned him to an emergency meeting. They gathered inside the grand hall, faces pale with fear and confusion. Arista, the high priestess, paced restlessly near the altar, her white robes smeared with ash. Councilman Lycres looked as though he had aged 10 years in a single morning. Aeson, Lycres said, you were at the site of the flame. Tell us everything. Did you anger the gods? Is this destruction a curse? Arista glared at Aeson, her eyes blazing with accusation. I warned you not to approach the sacred fire. You defied divine command. And now look what has happened. Aeson met her gaze steadily. This was no punishment, priestess, and the flame was no blessing. It was a warning. He recounted the encounter with Aegeus, the guardian who spoke of an ancient war returning. He described how the flame collapsed, how the sea reacted, and how the strange glow followed the ship. By the time he finished, silence filled the hall, thick and suffocating. Arista shook her head violently. You expect us to believe a mythic guardian stepped from divine fire to choose you for some epic war? Aeson stepped closer. What I saw was real, and what attacked our city this morning was not human. The gods are not punishing us, they are warning us. Something is coming from the sea. Lycres swallowed hard. Then what are we to do? Aeson answered without hesitation. Prepare, train, fortify the coasts, and gather warriors worthy of facing whatever rises next. Damon spoke up from behind him. Thalassia must unite, priests, soldiers, sailors. We no longer face human threats alone. Arista's expression darkened, but even she could not deny the destruction outside. At last, she said, Then may the gods guide your hand, Aeson, for our city's fate may now rest in it. When the council ended, Aeson stood on the balcony overlooking the wounded city. Damon joined him silently. What do you think will come next? Damon asked. Aeson slowly closed his eyes, recalling Aegeus's final warning. When the second flame rises, your enemy will already be here. He opened his eyes, a hard resolve forming. We don't wait, he said. We prepare, we train, and we find the warriors the flame meant to choose. And beyond the city walls, deep beneath the waves, the sea shimmered faintly, as if something stirred in its depths, awakening. For 2 tense days after the dawn attack, the sea surrounding Thalassia behaved strangely, as though the ancient waters were holding their breath. Fishermen found their nets empty. Traders refused to set sail. Mothers kept children indoors. Rumors of ghostly silhouettes drifting near the harbor at night spread quickly through the city. Even the gulls flew in odd circles, avoiding the open water entirely. The air carried a quiet fear, one that seeped into every street and home. Aeson walked through the western district, where the mysterious assault had struck hardest. Buildings were torn apart in ways no human weapon could manage. Thick gouges marred the stone walls, glowing faintly before evaporating like mist in sunlight. An elderly potter knelt beside her shattered kiln, sobbing softly. Aeson crouched beside her, offering words of comfort, but his mind churned with worry. The destruction was not random. Whatever had attacked had moved with intelligence, testing structures, collapsing key supports, studying the city as though preparing for a larger strike. At night, standing on the cliffs with Damon beside him, Aeson stared out across the silent sea. The first attack was a probe, he murmured. Scouts testing our defenses. Damon shook his head, still struggling to process the unnatural enemy they faced. Scouts? Those things. Aeson nodded. They vanished at sunrise. That tells me they fear the light. And they learned something today. They learned where we are weak. Damon clenched his fists. Then we need warriors strong enough to face them, whatever they truly are. The next morning, Aeson summoned anyone capable of fighting. Sailors, hunters, soldiers, mercenaries, archers. Hundreds filled the training fields. The city needed a new kind of warrior, one that could become more than mortal soldiers. Despite Arista's warnings, the council granted Iason full authority to prepare Thalassia for a deeper, stranger war. He addressed the crowd, voice carrying across the field. Our enemy is unlike any we have fought. You have seen the ruins. You have heard the cries. We will not surrender. We will not be prey. We will become stronger than anything rising from the sea. The people roared in agreement, but Iason's eyes narrowed. The flame of Aegeus had chosen him, yet he still had no idea what that meant. Only a handful among these hundreds might truly be destined to wield that power. Training began at once. Iason designed brutal tests: endurance through punishing runs, control under pressure, climbing, swimming, precision drills, sparring until exhaustion. Many dropped out. Others faltered. Only a small group, less than 30, remained when the sun set. Even among them, Iason sensed something incomplete. None yet carried the inner spark Aegeus described. The flame had not revealed its chosen. That night, long after everyone else had left, Iason remained in the courtyard, practicing alone under the dim torchlight. His blade cut through the air with practiced strength, though doubt filled every motion. How could he lead a war against shadows? How could he protect his people against an enemy he didn't understand? His strikes slowed. His breath deepened. Then he froze. A voice whispered his name. Not loud, not soft, but unnatural, resonant, echoing inside the courtyard like a memory-given sound. The torchlight flickered violently. The air thickened. Blue light swirled at the center of the courtyard, rising off the ground like a living flame. The figure formed slowly, first a shimmer, then a shape, then the glowing silhouette of a man. It was Aegeus. He appeared less solid than before, as though he were carved from light itself. "You prepare," he said, voice echoing like distant thunder. "But you prepare without knowledge." Iason stepped toward the glowing figure. "Then tell me, what are these creatures? What threatens Thalassia?" Aegeus raised his hand, and the courtyard dissolved into darkness. The sea roared around them, black and endless. Then a city appeared, rising from the depths, built of shining bronze towers and radiant domes filled with living fire. "This was Aethernos, my home," Aegeus said. "A city born from the power of the ancient flame." The city was breathtaking, alive with light, but a dark shadow spread from beneath it, cracking towers, draining the fire from the walls. From those cracks seeped black shapes, slithering, rising, twisting like liquid night. "The night born," Aegeus whispered. "Shadows given form, not living, not dead. They cannot be killed as flesh can. They feed on fire. They consume light." The night-born swarmed the brilliant city, enveloping it in darkness until all vanished beneath the waves. When the vision faded, Iason stood again in the quiet courtyard, heart pounding. "Why now?" Iason demanded. "Why after 1,000 years?" Aegeus's eyes glowed, dimming as if weighed by sorrow. "Something has disturbed their slumber. Something ancient calls them again. The flame has awakened to counter them, and it has chosen you to lead the warriors who will wield its power." Aeson's breath caught. "How do I find these warriors?" Aegeus lifted his hand. "The flame will show you. When it rises again, it will reveal the ones whose spirits burn brightest." His form weakened, fading into sparks of blue light. Before vanishing completely, he added, "Prepare quickly, for when the second flame rises, your enemy will already be here." Then he was gone. The next dawn broke with a horn blast that shook Thalassia awake. Damon burst into Iason's quarters, breathless. "Commander, the sea! Look at the sea!" They ran through the streets toward the eastern cliffs, where hundreds of citizens had gathered, pointing and crying out. Far on the horizon, another column of fire was rising, not golden like the first, not red, but brilliant, icy blue, shooting straight into the sky like a spear of divine lightning. Its glow rippled across the sea in enormous shimmering waves. The second flame. Iason felt his pulse thunder with realization. Aegeus had warned him, "When the second flame rises, your enemy will already be here." And as the blue fire stretched higher, the water beneath it churned violently. Something huge moved beneath the waves. The sea darkened, swirling unnaturally, as though the depths themselves were twisting awake. The Nightborn were coming, and they would not come alone. The blue flame rose higher than the first, piercing the sky like a divine spear, and every soul in Thalassia felt the tremor that followed. A deep, pulsing thud from beneath the sea as though the ocean itself had a heartbeat. The wind died instantly. The gulls vanished. Even the waves stilled. Aeson stood at the cliff's edge with Damon and hundreds more, their faces lit by the eerie blue glow, and as he stared into the horizon he felt the same cold pressure he had felt when Aegeus appeared, only now it was overwhelming. The sea beneath the flame churned, twisting into spirals that grew wider and deeper with each passing moment, and then the water split open like a monstrous mouth. A black shape rose from the depths, not a creature but a mass, shifting, swirling, as if woven from the night sky itself. The crowd gasped and stumbled back. Children cried. Some citizens began praying loudly, others screaming. The mass rose higher, gaining form, until dozens of tall, shadowy figures spilled from it and spread across the surface of the water, walking upon it just as Aegeus had. Unlike him, however, their steps left ripples of darkness that devoured the natural light around them. Their bodies looked like tattered silhouettes, humanoid but featureless, with glowing slits for eyes, cold, blue, and far more sentient than any nightmare should be. The Nightborn had come. They moved slowly toward the coast, their shapes flickering as the light of the blue flame pulsed behind them like a heartbeat. Damon gripped his sword, though he knew steel alone would fail them. "We have to get the warriors," he muttered. Aeson nodded sharply, forcing his terrified mind into action. "Damon, gather the chosen 30. Bring them to the cliffs. The flame will reveal the rest." Damon sprinted off as Aeson stepped forward, shouting to the crowd to retreat into the fortified district. Panic erupted instantly. People ran in every direction, slamming into one another, crying and pleading for safety. The guards attempted to maintain order, but the terror of seeing the Nightborn consumed every rational thought. Still, under Aeson's commands, the chaos lessened enough for families to flee toward the upper citadel. Only when most civilians were safe did Aeson turn his attention back to the sea. The Nightborn were closer now, much closer, and they were not alone. The water around them rippled and cracked as more shapes rose from the depths. Some were small, crawling along the surface like insects. Others towered nearly twice the height of a man, their forms swirling like cloaks of smoke caught in a storm. Then the largest emerged, a colossal silhouette, 20 feet tall, ripped itself free from the sea, its body made of shifting darkness, its eyes glowing two piercing lines of blinding ice blue. The creature raised one arm, and the entire sea behind it bowed as if paying homage. Aeson's heart thudded painfully. This was not an army. This was a force of nature, a hunger, a tidal wave of shadow made flesh. The first rank of Nightborn reached the shoreline, their feet touching the sand without sinking, and the moment they crossed the boundary of land, a low, bone-shaking hum echoed across the cliffs. The very ground beneath Aeson vibrated. Torches around the city flickered out, snuffed as if swallowed by invisible hands. The air turned cold enough to bite into the lungs. Aeson grit his teeth. So it begins. Damon returned with the 30 surviving trainees, exhausted but determined men and women, their chests rising with rapid breaths. Some carried spears, others bows, some only daggers, but all bore the raw desperation of warriors facing an impossible enemy. "Form a line," Aeson ordered, voice steady despite the horror unfolding below. The 30 arranged themselves along the cliff edge. The Nightborn continued their advance, dozens now marching toward the city's lower walls. Some seeped into the cracks between stones, others floated upward in unnatural arcs, drifting toward the battlements. The archers released volleys of arrows that passed through the creatures as though through smoke. The arrows clattered uselessly to the ground. A chill seized the archers' hands, freezing the bowstrings. The Nightborn pressed forward. "Aeson," Damon said, voice trembling despite his iron resolve. "We can't fight this." "We won't fight them," Aeson replied. Not yet. His pulse quickened with Aegeus's words echoing in his skull. When the second flame rises, the chosen will be revealed. He stepped forward, placing his hand on the clay dolphin charm around his neck. Felt hot now, burning alive. He raised his voice toward the blue flame towering over the sea. Show me. The flame flickered, then pulsed, then erupted, expanding outward in a massive ring of azure light that raced across the water and slammed into the cliffs with a blinding flash. Everyone shielded their eyes. A deafening hum roared through the air, vibrating in their bones. When the light faded, Aegean looked at his warriors and froze. Several of them glowed, faint but unmistakably glowing. Small wisps of blue fire curled around their arms, their chests, their eyes. Some had the glow flicker only briefly, others burned brighter. But all marked by the flame seemed stunned, unaware of what had just awakened inside them. Damon stared at his own hands. They glowed too. Aegean felt a surge of relief and dread. You saw that, Damon whispered. The flame chose us. He looked at Aegean, expecting the same glow, but Aegean's hands remained normal. No light, no fire, nothing. Damon's eyes widened in confusion. Aegean, you're not glowing. Aegean swallowed, his throat tight. I was not meant to wield the flame, he said quietly. I was meant to lead those who do. Before Damon could respond, a scream rose from the city below. The Nightborn had breached the first gate. Their shadows spilled into the streets like smoke flooding a chamber. Warriors stabbed uselessly at them. Citizens fled in terror. More Nightborn rose from the shore, climbing the cliffs like silent spiders. One leapt toward Aegean's group. Damon raised his glowing arm instinctively, and the creature shrieked as if burned, recoiling violently. The light around Damon flared brighter. Aegean looked at his glowing warriors and felt a spark of hope ignite. The flame burns them, he realized. Only the chosen can harm them. But the Nightborn were still closing in, dozens scaling the cliffs, hundreds spilling into the streets, and the colossal shadow in the sea watching with its ice-blue gaze. Aegean took a breath, voice steady, carrying the weight of every soul in Thalassia. Warriors of the flame, he said, drawing his sword. Your battle begins now. And as the Nightborn swarmed the cliffs, the first clash between light and shadow erupted with a blinding explosion of blue flame, beginning the war that would decide whether Thalassia lived or sank beneath the waves like Aethernos before it. The battle that followed was unlike anything Thalassia had ever witnessed, a storm of light and shadow colliding across the cliffs as the chosen warriors ignited with blue fire and hurled themselves into the Nightborn swarm, their glowing limbs carved. Through darkness like torches through smoke, burning shadow creatures into shrieking wisps that evaporated into the wind. But for every Nightborn that fell, two more crawled from the sea, scaling the cliffs with impossible agility. Aegean moved like a whirlwind among them, not glowing, not chosen, but guiding his warriors with perfect clarity, shouting commands that kept them in formation even as chaos raged around them. Damon fought at his side, his arms wreathed in searing blue fire, every punch blasting holes through Nightborn bodies. The air crackled with energy each time a chosen warrior struck, the cliffside lighting up with brilliant azure bursts. Yet the colossal shadow creature at sea remained still, observing, calculating. When it finally stepped forward, its titanic leg emerging from the water like a pillar of night, the entire cliff shuddered beneath its weight. Arrows shattered against its form. Thrown spears dissolved before touching it. Even the warrior's blue flames flickered as its chilling aura spread across the land. With each step, the creature drained light from the world, dimming torches, suffocating the glow of enchanted warriors. Damon staggered, gasping as his fire weakened. It's consuming our strength, he rasped. The Nightborn surged, pressing the advantage, and for a moment the battle seemed lost, until the blue flame on the horizon pulsed again, brighter than before, sending a shockwave of power rolling across the sea. This time, the wave of energy didn't choose, it commanded. The entire cliff exploded with azure brilliance. Every chosen warrior screamed as their blue fire intensified, flooding through their veins with divine fury. Even Damon's weakened glow transformed into a roaring aura that enveloped him completely. Aegean, however, remained untouched until something strange happened. The clay dolphin charm on his neck grew blisteringly hot. He ripped at it, but it fused to his skin, melting into a stream of white-blue fire that shot up his chest, spiraled around his arms, and burst from his eyes in a brilliant flare. Damon stared, stunned. "Aegean, you're glowing." And indeed he was, not with blue flame like the others, but with a rare, blinding white fire that crackled with the same divine resonance Aegeus carried. The colossal Nightborn froze mid-step, its icy eyes narrowing, sensing the return of a power it had once feared long ago. Aegean felt energy surge through him, unfamiliar yet instinctively understood. A deeper flame, older and purer than the one granted to the others. He stepped forward, the world trembling beneath his feet. The Shadow Titan raised its massive arm to crush him, but Aegean leapt from the cliff with a roar, landing on the creature's arm with such force that blue fire erupted in shockwaves across the sea. He sprinted up the creature's shifting darkness, each step burning footprints into its form, while Damon and the other warriors blasted through the smaller Nightborn, clearing his path. Reaching the creature's head, Aegean thrust both glowing hands into its chest, channeling every ounce of white fire he possessed. The Titan convulsed, screaming in a soundless howl as cracks of white light spiderwebbed across its body. The ocean shook, the cliffs shook, the sky itself seemed to tear open with brilliance as the light detonated outward in a blinding explosion, vaporizing the Titan into a burst of shimmering dust. The remaining Nightborn shrieked and dissolved instantly, fleeing like scared animals into the waves before disintegrating completely. Silence fell. The blue flame on the horizon dimmed, lowering into the sea like a satisfied guardian. The cliffs were battered, the citadel damaged, and many warriors lay wounded, but Thalassia still stood. Damon fell to one knee, overwhelmed. "Aegean, what did you become?" Aegean stared at his hands, the white fire slowly fading into warm embers. "Not a god," he whispered. "Not a chosen." He looked toward the calm sea, remembering Aegeus's warning. A leader born from conflict and shaped by the flame. The people of Thalassia soon gathered, cheering through tears. The chosen warriors stood behind Aegean, their blue fire now gentle, pulsing softly like living torches. For the first time since the omen appeared, hope washed across the island. Damon approached and placed a hand on Aegean's shoulder. "The Nightborn will return," he said quietly. This was only the beginning. Aegean nodded, gazing across the horizon where the flame had burned. "Then we will be ready," he murmured, "for we are the warriors of the Aegean Flame." And as dawn broke over Thalassia, casting gold across the battered cliffs, the people knew their world had changed forever, but they would face whatever came next, united under a commander who now carried the fire of a forgotten age within his soul.